The Economic Times Awards is a grand celebration of corporate excellence. But over the years, the awards evening has become larger than just corporate excellence. It has evolved into a platform where government and business leaders come together to discuss, debate, and join hands in shaping India's economic destiny. The central theme of today's discussion is ease of doing business. This government has been working relentlessly on economic reforms. Yet, there are areas where business leaders expect more action. We will not shy away from discussing some of that today. On a lighter note, whatever may be said about intolerance in this country, I'm sure this panel will tolerate all of our questions. But first, let's recognize the good work this government has done in the past 19 months. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in giving all the ministers a round of applause for the good work done so far. Thank you. On that note, let's dive right into the panel discussion this evening. Earlier this week, the World Bank forecast that India will be the fastest growing economy in the world over the next 3 years. Mr. Jaitley, what are the main challenges we need to overcome to make this growth possible?
I think over the last 1 year, both the World Bank, the IMF have repeatedly said that. I think it's only partly a good news, because it's a hard reality which everybody knows that the rest of the world has slowed down. At the same time, everybody who analyzes what's going on in India also realizes that if in an adverse situation we have a potential to, let's say, grow at about 7.5%, then the Indian normal can't be 7.5%. The Indian normal has to be higher. And therefore, you can almost see a writing on the wall that what are the steps you require to take. As I've always said, to get that extra 1 or 1.5%, so that you are able to achieve that potential and then for a considerable period of time grow at that pace. It's only then that your revenues go up, your poverty alleviation is much better, you can actually feel a greater comfort going on the ground. I think a lot of reforms and changes have taken place. The direction has been consistent. And therefore, there's a lot of activity which still has to take place. As I said, infrastructure, there is still a lot we have to do. And this is what I just mentioned, that assuming we have this year, then probably the spiral impact of that would have been on the economy itself. And therefore, in the absence of situations like this, should we not now start concentrating on higher expenditure as far as irrigation is concerned? And therefore, I think this is one priority area that we have. Spending on infrastructure, I think it's made a difference. It's made a difference in rural roads. It's made a difference in the highways. I think the kind of steps Suresh has started taking in railways, another 1 or 2 years, when you see an actual transformation of the railway stations taking place, the quality of service taking place, I think it will show its impact, if at all. And the problems of various sectors are different. Power sector, for instance, with the kind of changes, reforms which have taken place, they are moving ahead very fast, but they have the obstacle of the health of the DISCOMs, which they have to overcome. Our ability of the banking sector to lend has to be increased, and which has been adversely affected. Now, if these are some of the areas we can stitch up, in the next 1 or 2 years, I think it's possible for us to achieve what the Indian normal is.
Mr. Jaitley, you also started an intellectual speech on the politics of reform. GST is a pressing issue. How can this government engage the opposition better to ensure that politics do not slow down the reform process?
You see, let's be clear. Almost everyone is on board. I have never seen a complete coalition of regional parties supporting a particular proposal. Almost each one of them, without an exception, is supporting it. Even the UPA allies are supporting it. So let's be clear, the RJD has said they support it, the JDU has said they support it, the NCP has said that they support it. So it's only one political party which is opposed to it. And the one political party doesn't say we are opposed to it, they only raise impossible conditions. When I speak to the mid-command of that party, I come back with a sense of optimism. And when I meet them just before the parliament is about to commence at 11 every morning, I think the high command prevails over the mid-command. And therefore, the problem is not with Indian politics, the problem I think is with a few individuals.
Mr. Suresh Prabhu, our Railways Minister, is known to quickly respond to any tweets from passengers. I hope no passenger tweets anything tonight that might well interrupt the discussion. But Mr. Prabhu, if you had to tweet a message to the opposition, encouraging them to go ahead and help reforms move ahead, what would you tweet?
You mean on the railways?
On the overall reforms, progressive reforms in the country.
I think, the opposition has to oppose for certain things, which I understand that's why we call them opposition. But they also are responsibility of proposition, so they must propose something. So, something in which we feel like the GST bill, which is something which has been for a long time debated. The parties which are now in opposition were also trying to pursue it, and we also been giving constructive suggestion to them at that particular time. So I think they must really come forward and give some alternate ideas which are really workable, not put certain impossible conditions which cannot be fulfilled. It is like saying no in a very polite manner. So this is not a way to do it. So I think if you can do that, and we can achieve that. In fact, one good example is when we are trying to pass the Electricity Act, we had actually consulted a lot of parties. I think we should try to prevail on all the parties to support. Like most of the parties, regional parties who are larger in number in parliament, they are supporting. So I think this is the duty of those who oppose for the sake of opposition should try to work with us and do it in the national interest. That's what it should.
That's true. That's true. Mr. Prasad, would you like to add anything to that? What would you tell the opposition?
Well, my take is very simple. A party which has ruled the country for more than 50 years, should we presume that they are having an illusion that they are not going to come to power at all? If that's the case, then it's a different proposition altogether. But I would think that posterity also looks towards them. And if on certain issues, as Arunji rightly pointed out, there is such extraordinary consensus, then they need to introspect. Is personal ego denying the most eagerly awaited reform? That's how I'd like to see it.
Let me try and get in a question from the industry now. Mr. Rahul Bajaj, would you like to ask a question?
I don't think any one of them would like me to ask a question. The question is to Arun. Arunji, you have covered all the points which need to be done from an economic and industrial point of view. And I don't want to praise the government, but in the last 18 months, this government has taken a lot of good steps to the good of the economy and to promote industrialization, including your three colleagues sitting here. And one who's not here, I don't know why, but Mr. Gadkari, also from the state, who's done an excellent job. The fact remains, after the parliamentary elections, which we all know what happened, great victory, the assembly election, Delhi, Bihar, local elections, UP, Gujarat, are they giving a signal? I don't understand that. I think you politicians would know that much more. I'm sure you've gone into details. That there must be a course correction somewhere compared to what you people have been doing for the last 20 months. Economically, politically, socially, in any area, to see that India moves forward. We all want good for India. Agriculture, services, industry, there's no debate on that. From that point of view, I'll have two questions, actually one question, two parts, general and specific. Specific, you answered that, and Anand asked a question also in the very beginning. What more can be done to get Congress on board? Now, they don't want to listen, then they'll pay the price tomorrow, as my friend Ravi Shankar said. Posterity will judge them. But PM called them for tea. 2 days ago, Venkaiah Naidu went and met the Congress president. You and Venkaiah ji have been in touch with the opposition leader. Forget the middle level or high level, Anand Sharma and Ghulam Nabi Azad, that other. But the mother and the son, let's face it. But is it, you can't say that, I can say that. But But we can't escape the reality, Arunji. We can't escape the reality. How do we get them on board? Because money bill, joint session, ordinances are not, you have said that in between, not long-term satisfactory solutions. Maybe March, April, Rajya Sabha, slightly better for the NDA, slightly worse for Congress. GST may get passed with that little difference because a lot of people are on board, a lot of parties are on board. But you still want real estate bill, bankruptcy bill. We must have Congress on board. प्रेम से, डर से, भगवान जाने कैसे, आप उनको वोट पे लाइए, एक बात. And second, the general point, आपने बहुत बताया अभी, but 18 months you did a lot. Next 12 months, this year which is starting, what will you do different to make India a much better place? Thank you.
Let me answer the second question first. I think what has to be avoided first of all is that India must avoid, while we debate which way the country moves and the economy moves, any form of policy diversions. Issues which come up which have the ability to lead to a policy diversion are something that India can't afford today. I think as far as the center and the states are concerned, and I'm talking of all the states, there are 2 or 3 important things which need to be done. When you speak in terms of, Anand mentions the ease of doing business, I can say with a sense of comfort that compared to the past, the image of India with high corruption levels, discretionary allocations of natural resources, jumping from one controversy to another, I think all that is over. People are no longer rushing to Delhi for favors. Things are happening in the normal course. The kind of fear psychosis as to who would get arrested in which case by the CBI, all that is in the past now. And therefore, there is a much more comfortable environment. And in this comfortable environment, whatever are the logical steps to be taken, and I think one of the most important steps which is required is both in terms of direct and indirect tax rationalization. I think rectifying the health of the banking system itself. And in each one of these areas where my colleagues represent, and Mr. Gadkari who is not here, I think these infrastructure areas to grow faster, generate a kind of an economic activity where private sector also, its own ability, today it's feeling constrained because they've had overcapacities, they are trying to fill them up, all that itself improves. And I think if you move in that direction and the government concentrates on infrastructural spending, on social sector spending, on areas like rural spending, irrigation, etc., where purchasing powers can pick up, I think we can take advantage of the situation itself. How do you get the Congress party on board? Now first let me correct the record. Not only in the last session, but even in the earlier session. In the last session it was done publicly. In the earlier session it was done more privately. Some of us, and I include myself in it, had almost met most senior leaders of the Congress. Privately everybody tells me that they know they must support this legislation. Abhi atmosphere nahi hai. And I think this is a problem which you must seriously analyze in a party of that kind. Because I have no doubt in my mind that some of the issues which have been raised are clearly an afterthought. After all, the present president, when he introduced the bill as a finance minister, he was a man of great wisdom. He knew what he was doing. His successor and my predecessor, Mr. Chidambaram, knew what they were doing. It never struck them that tariffs must be mentioned in the Constitution. Now, it's the most illogical thing for any country to do that you start putting tariffs in the Constitution. Tariffs are never cast in stone. And therefore, you may tomorrow well have a situation where there's a drought in 10 states or there's a flood in 10 states and you have to vary the tariffs. You go about amending the Constitution and we know how complicated a procedure it is. And therefore, inventing this as an argument, I think is intended to say that we are laying down an impossible condition. I have still to meet many Congress friends who are privately willing to support that argument. Then to suggest, I think what the UPA had found a solution to dispute redressal between the center and the states. And that correction which they had made was that after all the center is surrendering its taxation authority to the GST Council, the states are surrendering it. The GST Council will adjudicate the disputes. And if there is a stalemate in the Council will itself start and evolve a dispute redressal mechanism. Why should the states accept a dispute redressal mechanism that I am going to set up? They'll feel that that's loaded in favor of the center. And therefore, this solution which was found under Mr. Chidambaram's signature, I think was an ideal solution, that the GST Council will resolve the disputes, and if they can't resolve it, there is a stalemate, a dispute redressal mechanism will be created by the GST Council. Once these obvious suggestions are there, I think if one were to go on to the merit now, yesterday I read a preposterous logic saying, oh, they've met us and told us, but they haven't given it to us in writing. Now, democracies don't work in that manner. It's obvious that not allowing the GST bill to be passed is giving some people a sadistic pleasure. But then democracy has its own strength. The last laugh is always the best one.
That's true.
I think I'll use your persuasion.
Yeah, Mr. Goyal, I think your ministry has some interesting experiences very recently. Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Odisha, 3 non-BJP ruled states have all signed up for the debt recast and revival program for DISCOMs. How can we build on this cooperation some more?
Well, just to put the perspective, 2 Congress states also, Uttarakhand and Himachal, have also signed up. And that in a way covers nearly 90% of the debt of the DISCOMs, more than 3/4 of the country. And the advantage was that this was an entirely bottom-up approach. the central government has decided nothing under Uday. It's all been decided by the bankers, by the state governments, the DISCOMs, consumer organizations. And it's been an iterative process that we ran through several times. Possibly I would have sat into at least 100+ meetings while this was evolving, right up to 2 days before the cabinet when we made some changes for Jharkhand and Jammu Kashmir. We also kept it voluntary. We have not tried to impose it on any state. So really my job ended the day Uday was approved by the cabinet, because now the officials are talking amongst themselves and sorting out the nitty-gritties. And to my mind, there is a time up to which we can wait for other political parties to respond to this clarion call of the people of India that they want a better quality of life. Beyond that, we may have to possibly look at alternate mechanisms. We may have to look at alternate paths to achieve the same goal. And I have no doubt that Rahul Bhai is absolutely right. It was a brilliant question to begin with. That beyond a stage, if we are not able to get them on board, I'm sure the Honorable Finance Minister must be having a trick or two up his sleeve which he can't disclose in a award function. But we'll have to move beyond trying to just look at one act or one law as being the panacea of all the problems of this country. I remember when even the coal mines bills were under consideration of Parliament, in the first session, in the winter session of 2014, I was not able to get it passed. There was disruption in the House. Though the Lok Sabha, which represents the will of the people, was on board, in the upper house, we were not able to get through. In the budget session, I think the realization dawned on almost all the parties, as Finance Minister rightly said, that the benefit, not 1 rupee of that benefit, of a transparent and honest auction was being kept by the center. And in fact, it was the Honorable Finance Minister himself who, when we were discussing in a small group about the law, he said, no, this money should go to the states. Center will not keep a single rupee out of it. It was his sagacity that brought me to a situation that there was a pan-India consensus on approving that. Of course, as he rightly said, politics, end of the day, does prevail, and only 3 political parties opposed it. One was, of course, the yours truly that you are all discussing. Possibly they didn't want honesty and transparency to come into the system. They preferred the earlier mechanism where they could favor their friends and family and a few corporates. The other was the left parties, which obviously don't want any good to happen to the country. He just spoke about Kerala and West Bengal and the pitiable state they are in. The third was the DMK. And again, a party we all know has been ousted out and almost has been decimated in Parliament, thanks to the way they conducted themselves while they were in government. Other than these 3, every political party, north to south, east to west, of every ideology, supported that. And I think the pressure built up on the rest, not to disrupt the Parliament and not to oppose it, just like the public pressure helped us pass the Juvenile Amendment Act right now. So to my mind, we need the people of India to also come on board and take this as a shared responsibility. It cannot just be left to a set of people in one family to hold the country to ransom, but it also cannot be just said that it's the responsibility of the Honorable Prime Minister and Finance Minister to resolve the problems of the country. I think when all of us work together, as Paul Coelho said, once all of us desire good to happen, the entire universe will conspire to make it happen.
That's true. Mr. Prasad, you've been working proactively to solve the call drop problem. Yes, it is a quality of service issue. But telecom CEOs also say that this is also an ease of doing business issue. So they'd like faster clearances for setting up towers, easier clearances. How do you respond to that?
Well, my take is very simple. I am willing to walk 10 steps, they will have to walk 20 steps. As far as policy is concerned, I have cleared all the policies pending for the last 10 years. Defense bands have been identified, notified by the cabinet, pending for the last 7 years. A spectrum sharing, a spectrum trading policy is in place, pending for the last 7 to 9 years. Liberalization policy is in place. Proposals have started coming. I have already notified the state governments can be used for installation of BTS towers. Even postal department buildings can be used. I have written to all the chief ministers to permit them. I have been speaking strongly against this so-called mischievous campaign of emission being dangerous to health. I have done my best. But they need to recognize one thing very clearly. And sitting here, let me be very frank, I am firm with them. That to give quality of service is their responsibility. I'll do a lot of tough talking for them to acknowledge that. I'm happy now they're acknowledging. Let me ask a simple question to you since you have raised it. How is it that in only 3 months' time they could install 25,000 BTS in the entire country? They could have done it earlier. How is it that they could do it in the last 4 months in Delhi around 2,000 plus? Therefore, they need to do 3 things very clearly. A, harmonize their network. B, identify the gap. And C, publicly invest in the gaps as far as reinforcement infrastructure is concerned. A big international CEO of a big company came to India, met me and I had to talk to him, and he publicly apologized about call drops. Quality of service is very important. And while as a telecom minister, I am the Minister for Growth of Telecom, I am also the Minister to protect consumer interests. And as far as consumer interest is concerned, it is their responsibility. If spectrum is available, more will be done, but sorry, alibi is not acceptable. I am willing to walk 10 steps, they will have to walk 20 steps.
Let's move to another area of infrastructure, the bullet train project. It's the largest infrastructure project in independent India. What kind of multiplier effects can it create, Mr. Prabhu?
This is for the first time we are getting such a high-speed project in the country. So if you look at it, China's growth, there are many reasons why China could grow at 10% plus for so many years. But one of the big contributing factors for that was connectivity. And also, of course, tax reform was another reason why therefore the GST is important. But connectivity played a very critical role in ensuring not only people could move from farm to factories faster, but also the goods could move from ports to factories or from factories to the markets. And therefore, if you really want to bring in that kind of connectivity for the betterment of India, bring growth into the country, we need the technology of that kind. Now, we don't have the technology. So, one of the ways to look at it is that start reinventing the wheel and wait for another 20-25 years to get there. The other way too, you get it in so that we actually have the use spin-off benefit of that in the project itself, but also into the entire ecosystem that will be really developed around that. So, the Japanese have given us the 80-85% of what we are going to do, about 1 lakh crore project will be made in India. So, that's Make in India campaign of the Prime Minister, which will be really successful. Also the technology transfer and the whole ecosystem. I will just give one example. When the Suzuki came to India, we were never part of the global supply chain for auto components. But because of that one big factory coming into the country, all of this ecosystem got developed. So I think I'm sure in the course of next few years' time, you will see that the project will be completed in 7 years. We are moving in that direction. And also, I'll just mention that. But also, while we are implementing that, the entire ecosystem that will get developed, the principal contractors which will be Indian, unlike in the past where they were more Japanese. So many things that we have put in, and also 50 years financing on 0.1% interest. So the bankers sitting here will tell you, when you are going to get 0.1% interest payable after 50 years, 15 years no repayment, that means you are actually getting not only free, but they are giving you something more than what the money is. So therefore, this is a great advantage. In addition to this, we have Mr. Deepak Parekh sitting here, he chairs one of the top companies, he will tell you, we bid 2 major locomotives manufacturing in India. They are really state of the art, which will be environment friendly, which will be the best technology in the world. 40,000 crores of contract have been awarded. that itself will again bring in a huge ecosystem. So we cannot imagine the benefit of this be going beyond the bullet train, beyond these contracts, in development of the entire ecosystem becoming part of a global supply chain, which will be really immense. So I think, like the same way, in ease of doing business, we want to know. One is how do you do business with railways? That we have to improve. So to do that, we have brought in complete transparency. All the contracts will be on e-tendering platform, everything, almost 100%, or not almost 100%. Plus, delegation has been made, so no single tender comes to me, but it is decided at the level of general manager or the DRM. So this decision has been taken. But also in addition to doing business with railways, and which to make it easy, how railways can contribute to ease of doing business. So for that, when the dedicated freight corridor comes in stream in the next 3 years' time, the speed of transaction will be immensely high. Today we don't have a timetable train for goods train, so automatically that will happen. The cost of doing business will go down, not just ease of doing business. So I think that all will be the spin-off benefit.
That's true. Yeah, thank you. Mr. Jaitley, another question. You talked about the government stepping up spending, even as the private sector is spending less. Does this mean that you're now ready to reassess the fiscal consolidation roadmap?
Well, I think you probably will have to wait a few weeks before you can get an answer to that. I think both have their own importance, and therefore last year we did announce a revised fiscal consolidation route, our journey to 3 years, which is, I think, extremely important. At the same time, stepping up expenditure is equally important. Of course, as far as fiscal data is concerned, things look brighter, and therefore the situation is well under control. And I think we'll probably keep both our objects in mind when we do that. A direct answer to this, if you ask me today, probably I don't think it will be prudent for me to say anything.
Yes. Even though private sector investment is slowing down somewhat, there is no gloom in the startup sector, which is really on an overdrive. We have Nikesh Arora with us today. Nikesh, what's the question on top of your mind?
Thank you, Anand. I have a question for the esteemed panel. There's a lot of talk about Make in India and the manufacturing sector. Minister Suresh Prabhu talked about the locomotive manufacturing plants. And there's talk about incentivizing Indian businesses because we understand globally that we're not at scale and we don't have the cost economics of manufacturing that places like China has. So we're creating subsidies and incentives to give runway to Indian manufacturing so that they can compete with global businesses, which I think is a fair and reasonable thing to do. The question I have is, a similar condition exists in the services business. Now, we have many homegrown internet businesses in India which are competing with global behemoths who have developed a cost to serve which is way better than what the Indian companies can get to. Is there any thought being given to supporting companies in India so that they can also get some runway to compete with global behemoths that are out there?
Well, if you've seen in the last 18 months, this government's focus has been on looking at outcomes and not necessarily bothering about the outlay alone. And if you see the scale-up of outcomes on any of the government programs, be it the roads and national highways that Minister Gadkari is doing, be it the scale-up on the railways, not necessarily only the bullet train, but also in scaling up the availability of amenities, better signaling systems, getting rid of the crossings, the manned crossings or unmanned crossings. The entire target setting in the government of India has been scaled up manifold because we do believe the aspirations of the people of India don't leave us the luxury of time anymore. And therefore, this economy of scale is what is going to help us capture getting manufacturing to India, whether it's in manufacturing, whether it's in services, in every sector. End of the day, it's the scale, integrity and transparency, and innovation in thinking, technology, financing. That's what's going to make a difference. And let me share a small example with all of you. In solar, which is a field that you come from, we started the process of reverse bidding and allowing the whole world to compete and come on board. And I've set a roadmap to scale up from 2.5 gigawatts when Prime Minister Modi was sworn in to 100 gigawatt by 2022. Now that's a scale at which manufacturing becomes extremely attractive. And when we did the reverse bidding, everybody was concerned that who will buy this solar power. Prices were 7 rupees, 6.5, 8 and 8 rupees in some places. It varied at different levels. But the reverse bidding between 2 or 3 iterations, the first reverse bidding got us about 580 or thereabouts. Second got us 5 rupees 5 paisa. And the third we were at 4 rupees 63 paisa. And I remember the amount of complaints and the amount of criticism that, oh, this is a failed program and nothing is going to work at these prices. If I may share a secret, people who won the contracts in the next round at 4 rupees 63 paisa also came and told me this is never going to work at this price. Okay, and in the next round, they bid at that price and won the contract. So it is workable. What we've done is we've scaled it up. We've understood the pain points. So we realized there was a counterparty risk. The DISCOMs are not in a good shape. We introduced NTPC, SECI, PTC, companies which are AAA companies. The counterparty risk came down, cost of debt came down, their capital return expectations came down. I find 463 workable. It will depend area to area. LEDs. India sold, the government company sold 6 lakh LED bulbs, procured and sold in the year 2013-14. In the entire country, 6 lakh. Prime Minister Modi said, look, this is just not done, Piyush. What are you doing about it? We scaled it up. What's our target? Our target is 77 crore LED bulbs before we go to election in 2019. 6 lakh in 1 year, 13-14. In the current year, 2015-16, only one company, Energy Efficiency Services Limited, is going to roll out 7 crore LED bulbs in 1 year. We are doing 4 lakh bulbs a day against 6 lakh in a year. Now that has spurred investment into that sector. Now people are talking of setting up silica plants to manufacture even the base raw material, apart from the other modules, cells, all of that that goes into solar or other products. I think the scale at which this government is planning to roll out each program, washeries, we are looking at 112 million tons of washery capacity in the next 18 months. You suddenly will see equipment becoming cheaper, the scale goes up, manufacturing becomes cheaper, more attractive, and this will have a domino effect on the services sector. So I think it's a change in the mindset, it's a change in the optimism that this government has, in the innovative strength of the people of India and the entrepreneurs to be able to come up with very attractive propositions. And I have, to my mind, no doubt that the outcomes that we are targeting, we will achieve, and if I may add, with or without the support of any party.
I think we'll have time for one more question from the industry, and then we'll wind up with some closing comments from the Finance Minister. We have Mr. Ajay Kanwal here. He's based in Singapore. Ajay, what's the one question global investors want to ask of this government?
Good evening. I think before I ask the question, I really would like to tell you what global investors feel. I mean, from their perspective, there's never been a better time to do business in India. So I think first we must give credit to ourselves that we've reached that moment. And the timing has been superb. Because you think back 2 years, people were looking for an alternative to China is overinvested from their perspective, possibly changing or slowing down. 2 big bets in Asia would have been India or Indonesia. And I think India really took up the challenge, really moved very fast. So one thing on people's mind is very clear, India is the place to do business. Of course, the ministers do travel overseas very often, so you will know the questions. The questions really are around ease of doing business and certainty. So around ease of doing business is the single window clearance. How can things get done faster? And around certainty, there is still this thing in their mind about the tax, as one example, saying arbitration, scrutiny, how does that get solved? So I really think there are two issues. One is ease of doing business, coming through from single window clearance as an example, and the old perceptions about have things become more certain and should we get surprised. So.
Well, let me tell you, you also mentioned that we moved up 12 positions. My own understanding is that the World Bank report, where we move up 12 positions, hasn't factored in everything that has been done in the course of the year because there is a cut-off date. So what is done before that date has been factored out. If all the other steps have been taken in, which probably would be factored in next year, so this movement upwards would begin, would be much faster. The idea really is on the ease of doing business. The time taken between a decision to invest in India and the actual project coming on the ground actually has to be hassle-free, and the time has to be reduced. Now the number of governmental permissions, files being held up, for instance, as far as I can tell you, as far as the central government is concerned, the period has been very significantly compressed. Almost in any department of the government, the FIPB, for instance, which was a blockade, today meets twice a month, and almost most permissions are almost on current. The Environment Ministry, wherever permissions have to be granted, I think is becoming completely problem-free, and it's moving reasonably smoothly. As far as taxation is concerned, the best I can say is it's still work in progress. It's work in progress because I think if there was one single big mess that we inherited, it was the taxation structure. It was the tax administration, it was an extra aggressive approach, it was a series of issues which had brought us a bad name, and I think there is a lot of ground which we had to cover. Now, one by one, we've been trying to resolve most of those issues. And I think as far as major taxation problems, which had almost become symbolic of India's aggressive tax character, I think about 3 of them seriously remain. And we are trying to find out solutions to those issues also. Once the process of, and it's already a pre-announced system, so I can share it with you, of bringing down India's corporate tax rates, along with rationalizing and phasing out exemption begins this year, I think our direct taxational rates will be amongst the most competitive in the world. And therefore, investors will find it extremely friendly to invest in India. Indirect taxation, I need not answer because I've already said that. I think that's extremely important as far as that aspect is concerned. The other area which I am a little worried, which adversely impacts us on ease of doing business, and that is where a work is to be done in the states. And these are all issues related to municipal and local permissions, and really permissions with regard to developing on land. And I think that is somewhere, just as tax is an area where it is work in progress, and I am reasonably confident we'll be able to move forward. This is one area which can actually set at naught everything positive that you've done, because it can be extremely frustrating, it can be time consuming, it can have all kinds of aberrations in it. The Urban Development Ministry and I have been in discussions with each other, and this is only, we can only advise the states to do it. And we are looking at suggesting some of the alternative methodologies to the states. The more progressive states, I think, have taken it very positively. Those who are wooing investments are immediately granting permissions, where chief ministers are in absolute control. They make sure that the investors don't run away, and therefore they are making it easier But that's not the pattern across the country. And I think the suggestion in effect is that how do we make all these, particularly in relation to manufacturing, all these municipal permissions relatively simpler? How many times should a person have to go? Is an architect's certificate enough to start construction and you go to the authority, the municipality, only at the stage of the occupancy and completion? I think those kind of suggestions we've mooted with the Urban Development Ministry and the ministry will take a final view.
Thank you. Yeah. Yes, yes, please. One quick word.
Yeah, quick one, just to give you a context of what we are trying to do as a government as a whole. We are trying to do a root cause analysis and figure out what could be the policy framework in which we can systematically ensure a predictable, simple and stable regulatory framework. In fact, the Honorable Prime Minister himself chaired a meeting where we discussed some sector of the economy which is very crucial for the energy security of India, where these issues were flagged off. And very clearly I can see that right at the highest level there is a concern that we have to show to the world and to our Indian entrepreneurs that we are there to bring in transparency but also simplicity. I'll give you a simple example that's my own experience. I used to get about 100 files a day when I became a minister amongst the three ministries. And these 100 files a day were more often than not somebody's case, somebody's individual problem flagged off to me. I took a decision that I will not sign a single file which relates to an individual company's case. And I insisted that the department does a root cause analysis and comes up with a policy framework if there is need for one, or rejects the case. But I have not signed in 19 months even one case where there was an individual case. And the result is that today I don't get even 5 files in a day. Because more things are being moved into policy. The Uday scheme brought out a lot of ideas that really came from the people. Yes. The framework on tariffs will now be out. So this government's idea is simplification. We are committed to it. I would urge all of you to share some more experiences.
For instance,
and let us know.
You mentioned arbitration. Pending disputes with regard to investments going on for years. Now, on the last day of the last session, we finally passed that bill. And I think it's probably the most progressive law of dispute resolution anywhere in the world, where the outer limit of time for arbitration, deciding a dispute, is 6 months, with no provision for extension. So if both parties agree to adopt the fast-track arbitration process, it will go on day to day, no adjournments, and the award to be given within 6 months.
With that last word from Mr. Jaitley, we must bring this time of discussion to a close. Thank you, Mr. Jaitley. Thank you to all the ministers.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.